Okay, hello. I'm Jessica Kerr, Jessitron Online, and I've been a professional software developer for 25 years now. I've never been a professional SRE. However, I want to share with you things I've learned in the last couple years about how, as a developer, I can take better care of my code in production and overlap these responsibilities. SRE stands for Site Reliability Engineer, and it's the latest name for Ops. First we got DevOps, and then we got SRE, and now we have Platform Engineering. And there's many names for things that basically mean taking care of the code that's in production. And ideally, the people who take care of the code in production overlap, sometimes being the same person as the people who are writing the code. Because imagine that, writing the code has a big effect on what happens in production. I would hope it would, that is kind of the point. But when we combine these two things, these two responsibilities of writing the code and of watching over it in production, then we can even better do the actual job of any software developer, which is to provide useful capabilities. My job isn't writing code. Most of the code I write, I delete. And my job isn't looking at graphs either. And the job of a DevOps person isn't, or an ops person even, isn't looking at graphs. Our job is to make sure we're providing useful capabilities in production to people or to software that indirectly provides usefulness to people one way or another. So when I look at it this way, I notice that I'm never going to be able to make this easy. I'm never going to make my software simple. Simplicity is not the ultimate goal because the capabilities I'm providing are not simple. It may sound simple to sell books or something, but actually it isn't. Something like Shopify that provides e-commerce is doing dozens of financial tracking and taxing and shipping and things under the hood to let me open up a little shop and be able to sell things that someone else is printing with my logo on them. These capabilities are complex, and I want to let my software absorb that complexity. So how do we support more complex capabilities? We have to support more complexity in our software. And that is where observability becomes really important to me. And this is why I work at Honeycomb now, which is an observability tool. Because as a systems person who cares about the whole system, I need my software to tell me what it's doing so that I can work with more complex software, so that I can support more capabilities. Now this is going to contrast with Fred's talk this morning, because at Cloudflare, they do the same thing so many times that I love the level of detail that we got in. How many people were in Fred's talk this morning? Yes, you were there. Half of us. Okay, so that was about optimizing, finding a port number in the Linux kernel. And I'm not going to go to that level of SRE. From a developer perspective, I care about serving a web page quickly, and I just get to use Cloudflare. Cloudflare provides some very useful capabilities to me, so that I can provide capabilities to the users of my software, maybe the people who hit my website. Oh yeah, I need to get my website up here. So this is about feature level, business feature level observability and optimizations. Should be pretty useful. First question, how many people here work on software that runs in production currently? A lot of people. And how many of you all have access to production logs or metrics? Fewer. I am going to strongly advocate for people having access to production logs and metrics so that you can care about production. And I'll show you some of that today. When you go to implement a feature, so you just picked up this ticket from the queue, or someone has bugged you in Slack, hey, can you do this thing for me? where do you go first? How many people go to the code? Nobody. Well, oh, yep. Right, guess the code. How many people write a test first? No TDDers here? Sometimes. Okay, cool. Yeah. And how many of you like run the software locally? Lots of us. Cool. Yeah, that was this slide. I like to do this first, but these days I've learned that actually I start by running the software in production. What is it doing in the world right now, and how am I going to change the world by implementing this feature? So today, I'll talk about some things that are relevant to this that we can do, and some details. But I want to start from production. Okay, so this is a good barcode that you can scan to go to this URL, and please add a little bit of load. Okay, there's only a few dozen people in here. I think you probably won't bring it down, but you can try.
Are you running through Cloudflare?
No, I'm not.
Bring it down.
Set up a JV test.
This is going to hit straight to my EKS cluster, which is not configured for super optimizations or anything, and it's generating the pictures each time. So the pictures are uniquely created. All right, so let's see. Jessitron or Oliday with ones.jessitron.honeydemo.io is the eventual address, and this is the meminator 10,114. Oh no, it's not working. Hold on. Escape. Now there it is. Okay. All right. So here we can generate some memes. You can probably guess what it's doing, but it has some random pictures and it has some random phrases, and some of them. Oh, there we go. Sorry, not sorry. That's my sister's puppy. And there's some Springfield ones in here eventually. But the meminator, it's generating some memes. Come on, do it. Be faster. Clearly the customer experience here is not optimal, although my oldest daughter drew that spinning cat, and that part is good. I commissioned that from her. She's studying art at MSU now. Man, I think we killed it. Okay. Fred is determined to bring it down. He's just slamming the go button. It is time. Okay, we probably killed it. All right, you killed it. You succeeded. Let's go look at what's happening in production. This Cooper Danny's pod. Let's start at the top. What is happening? Show me the fruits. Okay, we did have some, and now we have, things are happening. Let's go status code. Not that status code. I think it's HTTP status code. Since you managed to bring it down, I have to go look at this. No, we're only getting 200s. Last 2 hours. I really only want the last 10 minutes. Okay, well, it went down, but it's back up a little bit, maybe. I don't know. I'm surprised that the count stayed so low. Granularity. 10 seconds. It's not accomplishing much fast, but
I did get an error.
You did eventually get an error?
I did too.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Okay, so I do want to like implement something in this app and then show you, but apparently we're gonna have to first look at what's going on. No heat map of duration. Okay. So this is the slowness. This was gonna come later, but we'll do it now. A heat map is a funny graph that, as a developer, I understand count, right? Count of things that are happening in my back-end service is this actually. Oh, I know. No. I forgot. If you trigger it from the front end. Oh, there they are. There's our spike. Okay, so Fred got it up to 60 in 10 seconds.
Let's go.
With help from the rest of you. And yeah, we bumped that count up really far. I was counting only the load generated ones a minute ago, but now, wow, okay, so you got something into more than 60 seconds. Okay, so I can see that it's still returning 200 even if it times out, which is also not good. It is a demo app. But slow is the new down, and status code does not determine success, clearly, because if you're hitting go over and over again, this is fine. Oh yeah, okay. Here's the problem I wanted to demonstrate. But first I will tell you about this heat map. So a heat map of duration is, I have slides for this, is higher is slower, darker is more. And this is really bad. So we'll investigate that in a minute. But it started working again since Fred stopped slamming it. Thanks, Kubernetes. You probably restarted the pods. But customers have been complaining about this problem where the text doesn't quite fit on the picture. And as a developer, I'm like, well, that sucks, but should I fix it? Developer, SRE, also a little bit of product manager, when we really are caring about providing these capabilities. Should we fix it, or is it good enough? And I have an expectation now that my production code will tell me what I need to know to make decisions about how to change it. So does it tell me when the text runs over? That's actually kind of hard because, like, visually as a human, I can see that the text is running over. But what I can do is see, this is what I love about being a developer, is that I'm not afraid to change the code. Changing the code is my happy place. And darn it, these are computers. I wanted to start from logs. And if they're not doing what I want, then I'll make them do what I want, gosh darn it. My logs list go. Well, we shall get it again. Okay, so my next question is, as I'm running Memenator, I can find out that when I click go, it calls create picture. It's DevTools, it's really hard to see, but it says create picture. All right, what happens when create picture is called, and how can I get it to tell me whether the text goes off the screen? The usual way of finding out what happened in software as a developer is to look at logs. It's certainly what I use locally, because locally there's only one thing happening, and honestly, logs serve me pretty well. In production, when you've got a zillion things happening, more data is not more information. But let's look at all the logs. Body exists and all data sets. Put my thing back. And let's go over here. Okay, these are some logs. Okay, we definitely have some errors happening. Where? Give me the last 10 minutes. Okay, here's a post to create picture, so we can see that. Logs are not my favorite, but they are useful. There's still some errors happening. These ones, applying text to image with image magic, you're muted. Maybe somebody got you're muted, or that might have been the load generator. This looks like a good place to look. So my favorite thing to do when I get a log is to use it to find the right place in the code. Okay, so if I can look for this in the code, then I should be able to find out where to make this change, and that gets me to this file. Okay, so we're applying the text to the image. Image magic is like an open source command line image manipulator that I can use in 4 different language implementations of Memenator. And the key activity here is that we're spawning a process called convert command, which is image magic, with these arguments. And you can see it's going to resize the image. So let me make it a little bigger. Text is never big enough. It's going to resize it, and it's going to annotate it with a phrase. And then the question becomes, is the phrase too wide for the resized picture? So I'm going to uncomment some code, and I'm going to hit deploy, and then we'll come back and look at the code and a little bit of what it's going to do. deploy meminator. Okay, so that's going to build an image and push it to Kubernetes so that it will work on the website. And meanwhile, inside check whether text fits, it has to do two things. It has to measure the image width. It has the final output image at this point, and it has to measure the text width. And then I can tell it, give me the information I need, which is, if the text width is bigger than the image width, I want a warning. And this is going to tell me how many times is this happening. So my first change to the code is not functionality. It is tell me what I need to know. And this is my favorite thing to do as both a developer and an SRE type who cares about production. Make the code tell me what I need to know. This is, in my opinion, one of the key features of DevOps is you have this power together, both the need and the ability to do it. Deploy is successful. Let's go see. Now we know we're looking for a log containing this. Are we getting any of those? So now, here's some logs. How many of them contain this? Body contains this. Yes. Okay. 2. Actually, this is duplicate. Okay. Well, we've had 1 so far. Oh, 2. There's at least 2. So we're getting some. Actually, I have a dashboard for this too. And then I've made a dashboard for this change. Images created. Let me make it last 10 minutes. Oh, I guess it's already last 10 minutes. 438 images were created, and 4 have this problem. That's only 1%. Maybe I don't care. Maybe I leave that. Maybe I leave that in just to find out if it gets worse. Oh, now we're up to 20. It's like 5% almost. Some images do have overflowing text. But we might also ask, what impact on the performance does me adding that check have? Right, so we can look at that a couple ways. We can go back to here we go. Here's our count and our heat map. Let me look at the P90F duration, which I'll talk about more in a minute, and we can see whether that's getting particularly worse. It's so jumpy. Who knows? Do I have last 10 minutes? I do. Oh. Where? Okay, this looks like the initial freak out. It's actually not doing super well. Maybe that did have an impact. Okay, so I'm going to go look at one of these traces. I started with logs. Oh, I was even going to officially start with OpenSearch, but I can't actually get it to run. Maybe it's going to run today. It wouldn't at lunch. I'm using Honeycomb for this because I can't get the open source thing to run. I'm sorry. Sometimes OpenSearch and Grafana run for me in this environment, and sometimes they do not. But that is, I know other people get them to run, so that is my failure, not theirs. But this is where I really like software as a service. I don't have to make this run. Ooh, it's increased. Out of 228, it's 56 now. Or whatever the heck I ran this query.
I've been trying to help.
Thanks. Did you find some overflows? Does it ever fit? I'm a doctor and a lawyer.
Yes. Sometimes I saw it too.
Cool. Oh, okay, we're up to almost 10%. So this is happening pretty often. But is it hurting performance? I wanted to look at a trace. So we started out with logs because those are very practical. And if all you have is logs, that is enough to think this way about, dang it, code, you're going to tell me what's going on in production, and I'm going to have the data that I need to make good decisions. But bonus if you have traces. A distributed trace, we're missing some front-end spans. Browsers.
Oh, I think I sent that to the wrong data set. Okay, that's fine. So this is one that came in from a browser, but I didn't get the browser spans, which I think is my fault. It's fine. But it said it was DNS, and it took 28 seconds. Yikes. Is that the fault of my change? The waterfall view in a trace, it's like every row here is a log, but with some extra data that lets it hook it together. Every log event there has this same trace ID, so it's like a request ID, but also there's span ID and parent span ID to link them into this little tree. So we're doing this activity. Here's where we get the phrase, I think, from, oh no, we got the image from image picker, and we get a phrase from a phrase picker, and it knits the different services together so that you get an idea of all the different microservices. So this is like a stack trace, but at the process level, or an upside down flame graph, but at the process level. No, this one's not perfect. We're missing some spans. I need more spans. Give me a better one. Can't get everything right. It is a demo. Okay. On this one, we're missing the front end spans, but I blame browsers for that. Well, oh my goodness, 2 minutes. What is happening here? It took us over a minute to create the picture. It was DNS. This is not DNS. DNS is not the fault here. We actually did the where's my what is it doing? Is it retrying? Okay.
We're spamming the button.
Yeah.
You're spamming the button and it's like wigging out. What is going on? That's okay, this one I haven't seen before. What, it's connected a bunch of them into the same trace. It's like creating, oh, okay. Oh, I've never seen the front end do that. You clicked the button so fast that it decided all of these posts were a result of a single click. I've never seen that before. Okay, so in Honeycomb we have this concept of MTTWF, mean time to what the fuck? That's not how it's supposed to work. And this is one of those. Okay, I'm just gonna drill into this particular one that took 16 seconds. And we're gonna look at what Meminator did. It's a trap. This one is a trap. And here's its convert. And here's its check text width. Okay, fields, take this one off, take this one off. And this has made it interesting. Oh man, give me more name. Yeah, the weird trace structure here has made it interesting. But we're doing this apply phrase to picture. Here's the convert. Here's the check text width. Oh, it's too small. I can't show you. I need to show you that tiny little tail there. Okay, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go back to my query, and I'm going to make this, and I'm going to go pre-Fred spamming the button. Oh, but it might not show the most recent one. Well, I could probably find one, because before this, I turned it off, I turned it back on, I turned it off, I turned it back on. Shoot. Okay, y'all have confounded my tracing. Dang it. Let me find one that's checked next. Name equals check text width. Contains check text. And I'm going to find one from, oh man, what did I call that spam? Check text width. All data sets. And I'm going to find one from earlier. And maybe it will be normal. It is not normal. All right. First rule of live demos. When it doesn't work, give up. What I did here, and it does show in a trace, if I could find one that looked normal, is I'm awaiting the spawn process in TypeScript here, but I'm not awaiting this check whether text fits. It's returning a promise, and I'm not waiting for that. So this function returns before checking the text width, which does show in the trace. We'll probably find one later that shows it. It's fine. It's fine. Right. So I'm not slowing it down. I am using some more CPU. So if I was if it may well be resource constrained at the moment, but this isn't going to slow it down, and the trace will show it that. But I can use it to find out. Let's go back to my board. And what are we at now? Okay, it's less than 10%, but I think this is enough to justify some more work. And this might be, you might let this run in production for a week and come back, and it's time to prioritize tickets again, and you can say with more information whether this is important, because you took the time to make a small change to get it to give you the info. Okay, so how would we implement that? When I'm implementing that, I got into the code, and we know where to do it because we were already there last week. The first step is I need to know how wide the image is going to be. And then I know how to predict the text width because I did that in here. I can measure how wide the text is going to be. And I need to compare those things. But the predicted width of, or the width of the image is not the width of the downloaded image because it resizes it as part of the convert. So there's like, predict image width, here it is. There's like math that I have to do to say how wide is the image going to be after it's resized to a max of 1,000 by 1,000 pixels. Now, I can totally unit test this. This is a case where you should be able to totally write unit tests and feel completely confident that you've gotten it right. But let's pretend that it's more interesting, that involves user input, that you don't know all the cases of what they might input into this field. And then it's a great way to, one option for is this going to work, is to ask production, hey, if we did this thing, would it work? So in parallel to converting the image, again, I'm not going to await this function. I'm just going to spin it off, and let's make that deploy happen. I'm just going to spin it off and let it run at the same time that I'm converting the image. So again, I'm not going to affect response time significantly. I think this might calm down and work after a minute, and we'll be able to see that. But I can make production tell me, do I have this right? And that is another way of starting from production and making production say what's going to happen. Yeah, there's some overflowing text. Okay, and I tried to observe it in OpenSearch, but I had to go to Honeycomb. It's okay. If it isn't telling you, make it tell you. You're the developer, you have the power. And I highly recommend using OpenTelemetry for this. OpenTelemetry is recently ubiquitous. It's an industry standard way of sending logs and distributed trace spans, also metrics. But the nice thing about OpenTelemetry is that it's open source and industry standard and very well established and implemented in a zillion different languages. And that's happened in the last 5 years or so. But OpenTelemetry is run by the CNCF, the Cloud Native Compute Foundation. It's the second biggest project in a CNCF by many measures. Does anybody know the top one?
Kubernetes.
Yes. Yeah, Kubernetes is the biggest one. So it's like super well-governed open source. And it's actually a zillion different projects because there's implementations in all the different languages. And then you can use Grafana and OpenSearch and Jaeger and other open source tools on top of it, or you can also use any observability vendor. So if you ever want to escape from Honeycomb or New Relic or Datadog or Grafana Cloud or whatever, step one, switch to OpenTelemetry. And if you're building something out of the box, well, this is the standard, you would just use it. So OpenTelemetry is a big plus
for the industry in general, and generally for these standards of, hey, developers care about production, make production tell you what's happening. Also, plug for log analysis, because once you get into production, you don't want to read the logs, but you do want to count them, and you do want to aggregate over them. Yep, there's our count. Oh yeah, and you can do fun stuff like how much over is the image width? Actually, we can look at that. That's a good question. How much? We looked at like 45 out of 600 overflowed, but by how much did they overflow? And we can ask it, here it is, how much does the text overflow? So here I'm taking a max of the image width and a max of the text width over a particular time. And here is a heat map of how many pixels it overflowed by. So you can see generally image width usually maxes out at 1,000, but I think this is an old result. Let me, what's the time frame here? Last 10 minutes. Oh no, run 4 minutes ago. Okay, that's not bad. Run 5 minutes ago. Run it now. There it goes. Okay. Yeah, so the max image width is usually 1,000, and the max text width is usually under that, but it goes over it by a bit. And so you can do fun aggregations with your logs and get more information out of lots of them, and that's really necessary in production, which is completely different from logs on my machine, where I can look at them all and interpret them. And this can replace application metrics. Infrastructure metrics, you can do it, but it's trickier. But application metrics are much better out of your structured logs or trace spans, because then you can dig into them. But a little bit of statistics for application developers, because I didn't understand all this initially. When you start looking at something like duration, and you're like, how long does this take? As humans, we tend to think about it as, well, we'll just take the average when we have more than one number. But that's actually crap, because average works well in a standard symmetrical distribution. And these, we put them on there, they are not a symmetrical distribution. No distribution with a 0 on it somewhere that you can't cross can ever be symmetrical. So no distribution of time, which can't be negative, quest never comes back in the past, it can't be a symmetrical distribution, so average is never appropriate. Now you can say, of all of these, which one was in the middle? The median, that's legit. What's the half of them were slower, half of them were faster. That's also called the P50, because 50% were slower and 50% were faster. But there's lots of distributions that might have that same P50. Because there's never a tail past 0, but there is a long tail of slowness. And depending on how much you care, nobody's paying for Meminator, I don't care that much about the very slowest one. Someone can hit go again or refresh the page. But if someone is trying to buy something, I probably do care. If it's Taylor Swift tickets, apparently they'll come back tomorrow. But if I'm Amazon and this is a book and it might be an impulse buy and they're not going to come back tomorrow, I start caring about, I definitely care about the P90, where 10% of them are slower. I probably care about the P99. And if you're Cloudflare, you probably care about P9999. Right, so you as a business need to decide. Now, as Meminator, P90 is pretty good. If 9 out of 10 times you're getting it fast enough, good enough. It's the Meminator. It's supposed to be a little random. But then, the other thing you can do, and I told you to explain heat map. This is how heat maps are constructed. So you take that number, and now the vertical axis is duration. So higher is slower, higher is bad, and we can put these on that axis and turn them into dots. And we can grab all the other ones on that axis as dots. And these are all the requests that came in during this 10-second interval. And then in the next 10 seconds, we can mark the P50, which is, come here, which is halfway, and the P90, which is up there. And then in the next 10-second interval, we put
we take all the durations and we put them on the graph. And you can do that across time. You can draw the P50 and you can draw the P90. And that's what those lines mean. Is 90% are under this, 50% are under this. So you can stick with those lines, or if you're getting your application metrics from your log events or your trace events, either one, you can keep the whole thing. And that's a heat map. Higher is slower, darker is more. Darker is like more things happened in that particular bucket. So yeah, you can graph all the P999s and stuff, or you can have a nice heat map. I love the heat map. It's prettier. I can make it draw pictures. I actually do have a program that will put your company logo in heat map. Right, and then you can click into the heat map to get to a trace and see what it's doing. Oh yeah, let's check our change in production before we even make it. So here I'm totally testing in production. I'm effectively unit testing this tiny function in production, letting production generate all my test cases, and therefore I'm getting all the test cases that matter. Now, there might be additional test cases that matter next week that I haven't tested yet because that's a different week in production. But let's see if I'm reporting those correctly. I think I have that query in our board. Have we predicted the width correctly? So here I'm actually looking across the trace. I'm finding predict image width, and I'm finding check text width, and I'm comparing the predicted width from the beginning of the process with the image width at the end. And I see I'm getting 1000s, 750s. Yeah, this is good. Oh, here's one that's 750 versus 751. I don't care. I'm counting that's correct. A unit test would cause this to fail, and I'd have to go like work on my rounding or something, but that looks fine to me. So I can look and see that these are the same, 755, 756, or close enough. I could make a derived column that compares them and tells me across the board what my error rate is. In fact, I might have that. And I can get my overflow pixels. Okay. Right. So our test in production is succeeding, and we are able to predict the image width. That's what we're doing there. Oh, now I've got a trace that's friendly enough. I can see that apply text is doing multiple things. One, it's predicting the image width. And two, it's doing the convert. This is the main, oh my gosh, look at that. Oh no, okay, the whole thing was 199. And this was the convert. And here's my check text width. Okay, but apply text return before check text width returned. That's this little stick. It's like, hey, there's a child span. There's something that I kicked off that didn't finish yet, but I'm done. I've ended my span. I've returned my HTTP results. You can also see that predict image width is running in parallel with convert, and that's cool. So that's also not impacting significantly the latency. But now that we're confident we can predict the image width, we should actually use that result and change the point size. So instead of using the same point size all the time, don't need to do that anymore. And I don't need to do that anymore. Well, I can continue to check whether text fits, just as a check. But the predicted width will be calculated inside here, and we're actually going to try to reduce the point size to fits and see if we can fix the problem. And then we can look at whether we're succeeding at having any other effects. Okay, while that's going, let's see if there's anything else in here. Right, this is checking our change in production. We did that. And there's the trace that shows it happening in parallel. I love that about distributed tracing. Man, I found so many bugs in my node programs just by seeing what runs concurrently and what runs at the same time, and what waits, what runs sequentially. That is so hard to get right in JavaScript. Oh my gosh. And then we can count. So this one is going to happen after our deploy, but like observability, like changing the code, there's more stuff in this code. I have like OpenTelemetry is creating most of my spans and stuff, but here I'm doing a very useful thing, which I highly recommend, which is adding information to the existing span. If you're using OpenTelemetry tracing, you can pull that span out of thin air and just add stuff to it. I replace my log statements with this when I have tracing. And this puts all the information on one big event, and then you can correlate it with everything else. So if that took so long, you know all of this context about it, and they're all right there together. If you don't use tracing, the ideal is to wrap all of this context, everything about this process, up into one log statement and emit it at the end, a canonical log, some people call it. But one big structured log that says everything that happened in the service, so that when it's slow, you can say things like, well, which ones were slow? What do they have in common? We might be able to do that with our heat map. How's that deploy going? Well, it went. It went, and let's see. What I would expect to see is far fewer boards, far fewer overflow images created. So when I run this query, okay, well, I don't see any now. Let me try this in Meminator. It might show my deploy marker. Yeah, here's my deploy marker. Oh, but the logs aren't all in there. Okay, back. Okay, so I expect this query to never give me anything else again. And I expect, where'd my board go? I like to have a board per change for something that I'm rolling out incrementally like this and with information. Overflowed images created. Oh no, that's the same query. I'm a dork. So now I expect when we go to the Meminator, I expect some things to have a smaller point size, actually. Oh, look at that. Yeah, that was lucky. So now Roswell can have all of that text on him. Oh, not a bug, it's a feature. It's a pineapple whip. Good. Now that was an easy one. Oh yeah, that nothing fits on top of that Wendigo if you don't shrink it. Great. So now we can look and see whether my point size. How much does the text overflow? This should be not at all anymore. Yeah. Oh, here's our deploy. And now the maximum text size is lower. And I can also heat map point size. Do I have point size on this? Let's try that. Yeah, and I can see it maxing out at the default of 48, but sometimes being lower. That's great. I wonder, okay, that's great. And then we can go look at one of these. Oh, did I look at heat map of duration? It's fine. I'm only on text width. I can go look at one of these and see whether it's executing the way I wanted. Here's our check text width, that's later. Okay, here's our reduce point size to fit text. And now we can see that it's running convert a lot of times. And why is it doing that? And here's our point size of 26, and before that it tried 27, and before that it tried 28, and we can see that maybe we could do a better job.
And we should be able to see that in like, I am losing my query. It's fine. It's fine. We want backend for front end. I want span.kind equals server for incoming. And I want a heat map of duration because it's probably gotten slower. Over the last 10 minutes. Last 10 minutes. Give me that. It's hard to say whether it's gotten slower. Oh, you know, one reason it's hard to say is because, one, there's these stupid ones that time out at 60,000 milliseconds or 60 seconds. One, what is different about them? It says they're slow. It's not telling me. Oh, no, these ones have a bunch of different image URLs. Huh. I don't know why these ones are timing out. But I do know that having a few up really high, like, makes it really hard to tell a difference down here where most of the stuff is happening. So I can move this to a log scale. And a log scale is another thing that is not obvious. A log scale means instead of counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 up the line, it counts 0, 1, 10, 100, 1,000. So we're going up by orders of magnitude, which has the effect of taking those really long ones and making them just less far from everything. And anything that's grouped around 1, or in this case we've got 1,000, it's easier to see the spread of it. But heat map, let me make your dots bigger. 10 seconds. There we go. You know, it looks okay. I think it's probably fine. That's my P90. Maybe I don't need to optimize it anytime soon. P90 is very jump. Oh, I've got it grouped out by phrase. Test and prod is taking the longest. That's fine. Heat map's still accurate. Remove that to get the P90 overall. P90 is still 3 seconds. Not spectacular. But maybe that's fine. Maybe that's okay. And honestly, I would work on the timeouts and shorten the timeout before I would worry about optimizing my converts, even though it's like offensively badly implemented. So that lets us make this kind of prioritization. And then the last thing that I could talk about is looking at SLOs, because at some point you have to decide what's fast enough. And a service level objective is one way that we discuss with product managers in the business, somebody who knows how much they care about whether create picture is available and fast, which I currently have defined as completes in under 3 seconds. And we know that our P90 just bumped over the 3 seconds. So if the business has decided that 3 seconds is okay, but more than that is not, cancel. And our target is 90% for being under 3 seconds, then maybe actually I am justified in fixing that convert. Because look, we just like crossed a line that y'all set and we agreed was like the performance line. And we're burning our error budget. The budget is like, so we have 90% target. The other 10% is our error budget. The other 10% is fair game, and even if they're 60 seconds, they only count once against this. So maybe we should go in and investigate. And here's a clue. I'm not going to go into the details of this graph, but this one says that cat with the bow tie.agic always fails, which is because agic images always fail. So the biggest improvement I could actually make is removing that image from the list or converting it to a JPEG or a PNG. And having this kind of data lets me make decisions about, should I go implement this feature, should I add a capability, or should I work on performance? Should I improve the application because it needs it? But I did spend some time improving this application, and rather than improving the performance, I added Pineapple WIMP and
I'm a doctor and a lawyer because I was excited about coming to Springfield.
And now I want to take questions. Gene.
Is there a good rule of thumb for when you pick P90 versus P95 versus P99?
How many of our customers do you care about?
I mean, when you did we used to do 5 nines reliability or something like that. All sorts of people running blogs were saying I need 5 nines reliability. And it's like,
Are you S3?
yeah,
You don't need 5 nines. Yeah.
but I just don't know.
No, it's a good question.
And you're just basically saying how many users can we afford to piss off, or?
At Honeycomb, I have some stickers. I have a few. I'll get them out later at our tiny booth. Nines don't matter if users aren't happy. And so it's really about what your users will tolerate. Because if these are web requests, and it returns in half a second, that's good enough for human eyes. And in worst case, they hit control R because they're people and they can. So you need to base it on the tolerance of your users for failure. At Cloudflare, people are paying for better performance than they could give it without Cloudflare. So you have to be better than other people's websites, or they just use their own backend and faster. Whereas in a customer-facing product, there's people. What'll they tolerate? Your PMs hopefully have a guess, and then if you can measure, drop off, and Amazon can measure how much it costs them when they increase the latency. But also consider what you're backed on, because the reason S3 needs 5 nines is because the rest of the internet depends on S3, and we can never have more nines than S3 does. So if you look at the services that you're dependent on, you're not going to be stronger than they are. So don't try. You've got to give yourself extra latency, and then give yourself that error budget. And then there's the real way that we set these service level objectives, which is what's it doing now? Clearly that's okay. Let's notice if it gets worse. And often when it gets worse, you're like, nobody's complaining. Bump the SLO down.
Okay.
Yes.
So, I like the idea of starting with understanding what's happening in prod.
Mm-hmm.
But how do you deal with the change management reality of most software teams? I can't just let anybody introduce a change into prod on their own within a couple minutes.
Right.
I want some protectiveness. Maybe I can make it a couple hours, but
Yeah,
nobody can wait a couple hours to understand what it's doing and stay focused.
Right, it's been doing this forever. What's a couple hours? But yeah, release cycles matter. At Honeycomb, our release cycles are a little over an hour. But you still have to get a PR approved by someone on your team. If you're pairing, poof, the other person clicks approve, you're fine. That's immediate. Otherwise, you do have to get it looked at. Now, I test my observability locally. So I'll run the code and have it send stuff to Honeycomb usually. Honeycomb, our ingest is 5 seconds. You should be able to see it within 5 seconds, which is pretty good. It's not as fast as logs on your screen, but it's pretty quick. So I test that the traces look like what I want, and then I submit the pull request. And yeah, somebody has to approve it. But these are fast approvals because you're not changing the output. You're adding a log effectively. And then you do have to consider, while OpenTelemetry can go to any vendor, different vendors charge differently. So like in Honeycomb, we do the trade-off so that if you add a span or a span event, that goes against your quota. But if you add attributes, it doesn't. We don't care. We don't measure the size. I can put, I said this to the LLM, and it said this, and if it's under 100K total, whatever. But some vendors charge by size, so you have to care. Some vendors charge by, metrics have the huge problem of the number of values matters, which is just dreadful for, can I keep this? Can I record this? Logs and trace spans don't have that problem. Cardinalities, it's irrelevant. You can have as many IP addresses in your logs as you want. So there are different considerations there too, which is why some companies have, like, or if you're adding a metric especially, it has to go through this special team that is guarding the metrics budget. That is a terrible incentive to give your developers. Also, if you can't see the production logs, I mean, you can also measure stuff in test, but it's not nearly as interesting. There's a cost to development of, like, my brain space of thinking about observability. And the payback of that to me as a developer is getting to see that my features actually being used in production. And I get a lot of satisfaction. Say, hey, this was useful. Hey, they're using it in the way I thought they would. Or more likely, hey, they're doing something weird with it. What can I learn? And if you don't give developers that, why would they give your SREs more information?
I suppose I'll ask something. Is there a method by which you can be proactive about finding things you should be tracking? Or is it always in the, hey, there's a problem, let's observe the code, figure out what I could be tracking, and then look at that, and then go fix the problem? You're kind of advocating for the latter approach, but is there a way where you could go farther still and be like, now what can I track while making this for the first time? And be like, yes, this might be helpful.
I'm advocating for when you make a feature, make it traceable. You should be able to see the difference in your trace when you add the feature, which is really nice if you like to do demos at the end of a sprint or something, and you're not actually making a UI change, it's internal, you can show the difference in the trace. But never let a good incident go to waste. You know, that's an excuse to spend time on this stuff that other people will believe you. However, what I personally, well, whatever, I work in observability, so it's legit my job to futz with this stuff.
So I like to go to a trace, give me a trace, and find whatever's taking the longest. Well, in this one I get to play with fixing the missing root spans, but spans with error. This is a terrible trace. Fred, are you hitting it again?
No.
Run query. Okay, here's some normal ones. I like to find whatever's taking the longest and be like, what's inside that? That's slow, can I break it down? Or what important information am I missing? Like, step 1, add open telemetry. Step 2, add the attributes that are important to your business. If you're multi-tenant, add a tenant ID. If you're e-commerce, add a customer ID. Not their email address, please, but their ID that's not personally identified. So that when something happens, when things get slow or you're getting a bunch of 500 errors, you can say, who is getting these errors? And that's really useful and has business value, because then you know, is it your big account, or are you running out of database space because one free tier customer is spamming your API? Really useful to know. So I do like to tweak my telemetry, and it's just like any other tidying. You know, you notice a test that's missing and you write that, or you're going to change this code, so first you refactor it to make the change easy, and then you make the easy change. It's first, can I make this visible in production, and then can I see the difference? Yeah. So thanks for that question.
Is this only a backend to measuring tool?
Oh, good question. Right this second, I have screwed up the front end, and I'm not getting those trees, but it traces work gorgeously for request response in the back end. In general, Honeycomb doesn't care; it just works on events. OpenTelemetry will very happily send data from the front end, and if you take the Observa quiz, it'll show you a bunch of front end observability. No, it is not only back end, although OpenTelemetry started in the back end, and it is earlier in its development in front end. The web SDK
for JavaScript is pretty good. The mobile ones, we have some beta ones. We hired somebody to be like, please make this not terrible. For our telemetry. So it's getting there in mobile. But it does work for both. Thank you, everyone.